The truth rarely asks for attention, it only asks for one chance to be seen. No one inside Franklin County Courthouse understood the meaning of those words when the hearing began on a rainy Thursday morning. They believed they were about to review an ordinary complaint following a routine traffic stop. They believed the police report already explained everything that mattered. And for a few brief minutes, they believed the uniform carried more credibility than the woman standing alone before the bench. Courtroom 3 was unusually crowded. Attorneys organized thick files across polished oak tables while spectators filled nearly every wooden bench, drawn by a case that had quietly spread through the local community. A court reporter adjusted her headset. The clerk arranged exhibits into careful stacks. The soft rhythm of rain striking the courthouse windows blended with the faint rustling of legal documents as everyone waited for the proceedings to begin. At exactly 9 o'clock, Judge Rebecca Holloway entered through the private chamber behind the bench. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Every person stood until the judge took her seat. She glanced briefly through the case file before her eyes settled on the two people standing at opposite sides of the courtroom. On one side stood Officer Ethan Walker, a white patrol officer whose pressed uniform and polished badge reflected years of confident service. His posture was rigid, his expression composed, and his hands rested calmly behind his back. He looked every bit like an officer certain the facts supported his actions. Across from him stood Olivia Brooks, a black woman dressed in a charcoal business suit with a cream blouse and understated jewelry. She carried no attorney beside her. No family member sat behind her. She held only a slim leather portfolio against her side and waited with remarkable patience, her shoulders relaxed and her eyes fixed quietly on the bench. She neither appeared frightened nor angry. She simply appeared prepared to tell the truth. Judge Holloway reviewed the opening summary. This hearing concerns a complaint arising from a traffic stop conducted by Officer Walker 4 days ago. She looked toward the officer. "Your report indicates the driver became argumentative and refused to cooperate." "Yes, Your Honor," Walker answered confidently. "Her behavior required additional investigation." The judge nodded once before making a brief note. Several spectators quietly exchanged glances. The words sounded routine. Familiar. Cases like this entered courtrooms every week. Then the judge turned toward Olivia. "Ms. Brooks, you'll have an opportunity to respond shortly." Olivia inclined her head politely. "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice carried no resentment. Only calm professionalism. Officer Walker noticed her composure and interpreted it as calculation rather than confidence. He had expected frustration. He had expected accusations. Instead, her silence unsettled him more than any argument could have. The clerk slid another document toward the judge while the bailiff checked the courtroom clock. Everything seemed ready for an efficient hearing. Yet no one realized an important piece of the story had not yet entered the room. Judge Holloway looked back toward Olivia. "Do you have anything you wish to present before we proceed with testimony?" Olivia rested one hand gently on the leather portfolio. "Yes, Your Honor." She paused just long enough for the courtroom to become completely silent. "Before the court reaches any conclusions, I respectfully ask that the dashboard camera recording from the traffic stop be reviewed in its entirety." Officer Walker immediately shifted his weight. "Your Honor, the written report already summarizes the encounter." Olivia did not look at him. Her eyes remained on the bench. "The recording will speak more accurately than either of us can." A faint murmur spread through the gallery before disappearing almost as quickly as it began. Judge Holloway glanced from the officer to Olivia, then toward the evidence listed in the file. "The court will determine the order in which evidence is presented," she replied evenly. Olivia gave a respectful nod. "Of course, Your Honor." She said nothing more. She did not argue. She did not insist. She simply waited, as though she already knew that patience would accomplish what emotion never could. Outside, thunder rolled softly beyond the courthouse walls. Inside, the hearing appeared to be moving toward an ordinary conclusion. Yet somewhere beyond the courtroom doors, a man wearing the insignia of the city's police chief had just stepped through the courthouse entrance, completely unaware that within minutes he would discover his wife standing alone before a courtroom that had not yet heard the whole truth. 50 minutes earlier, nothing about the morning suggested it would end inside a courtroom. The rain had begun just before sunrise, leaving a thin layer of water across the quiet streets as commuters made their way toward work. Traffic moved steadily beneath gray skies, headlights reflecting off the wet pavement in long silver streaks. Olivia Brooks drove carefully through the western side of Franklin County, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel while soft jazz played through the speakers at barely more than a whisper. She had just finished speaking with a community outreach coordinator about an upcoming neighborhood scholarship event and was heading home to prepare for an afternoon meeting. Her schedule was full, but never rushed. Years of balancing family responsibilities, volunteer work, and public service had taught her that composure often accomplished more than urgency. She wore a navy business suit beneath a light trench coat folded neatly across the passenger seat. A leather portfolio containing notes for the afternoon rested beside her purse. Her driver's license, registration, and insurance card were already organized inside the center console, a habit she had developed long ago after watching countless people become flustered during ordinary traffic stops. She believed preparation prevented unnecessary misunderstandings. Ahead, the traffic light turned green. Olivia accelerated smoothly through the intersection, maintaining the posted speed limit. In her rearview mirror, she noticed a marked patrol vehicle several car lengths behind. At first, she gave it little thought. Police cruisers were a common sight throughout the city. A few moments later, blue emergency lights suddenly illuminated the wet roadway. Behind her, Olivia looked briefly at the speedometer. She checked her mirrors once more before signaling and pulling safely onto the shoulder exactly as she had been taught. She placed the vehicle in park, lowered both front windows despite the drizzle, turned off the engine, and rested both hands visibly on the steering wheel. Every movement reflected calm cooperation. She neither searched frantically through the glove compartment nor reached toward her purse. She simply waited. Several passing drivers glanced toward the stopped vehicles before continuing on their way. The patrol cruiser came to a stop behind her with its emergency lights continuing to flash against the rain-darkened pavement. Officer Ethan Walker stepped out, adjusting his campaign hat before walking deliberately toward the driver's side door. His body camera indicator blinked steadily against the front of his uniform. As he approached, Olivia greeted him politely. "Good morning, officer." Walker stopped beside the open window but did not immediately return the greeting. Instead, his eyes slowly examined the interior of the vehicle before settling on Olivia. For several seconds, he said nothing at all. The silence itself felt unusually deliberate. Finally, he spoke. "License, registration, and proof of insurance." "Certainly." Olivia waited until he gave a slight nod before reaching slowly toward the center console exactly as she had announced she would. She handed over each document with steady hands. Walker accepted them without comment. His expression remained unreadable as he glanced from the paperwork back to Olivia several times. Rain continued falling softly around them while the flashing blue lights reflected across the side mirror. It should have been an ordinary traffic stop lasting only a few minutes. Instead, before Officer Walker had even returned to his patrol car to verify her information, he had already begun questioning something far beyond the documents resting in his hands. The first question sounded ordinary. The second did not. Officer Ethan Walker studied Olivia Brooks' driver's license for several seconds before looking back into the vehicle. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "A community meeting downtown," Olivia answered calmly. "And where are you headed?" "Home." Walker nodded slowly, though his expression suggested he remained unconvinced. Instead of returning to his patrol vehicle to verify the documents, he leaned slightly closer to the open window and allowed his eyes to wander across the interior once again. The seats were clean. The dashboard was organized. There were no open containers, no visible contraband, nothing that appeared unusual. Even so, he continued. Is this vehicle registered to you? Yes, officer. How long have you owned it? Olivia answered without hesitation. Almost 3 years. Walker glanced back at the registration already resting in his hand, where the information was plainly listed. He asked anyway. What do you do for a living? The question lingered in the cool morning air. Olivia met his eyes politely. I work in public service. Doing what? Administrative and community-related work. Her response was truthful without volunteering unnecessary personal information. Walker's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's not much of an answer. Olivia remained composed. It's the answer I'm comfortable providing. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Rain continued tapping softly against the roof of the vehicle while traffic flowed steadily past the shoulder. The body camera mounted on Walker's chest recorded every second of the silence. Finally, he stepped back from the window. Stay here. Olivia nodded once. Of course. Walker returned to his patrol cruiser but did not immediately begin verifying her license. Instead, he remained inside with the driver's door open, occasionally looking toward Olivia through the windshield. Several minutes passed. Olivia waited exactly as instructed, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She never reached for her phone. She never exited the vehicle. She never displayed frustration. A passing motorist slowed briefly before continuing down the highway. The flashing emergency lights reflected across puddles gathering along the roadside, creating waves of blue across the wet asphalt. Walker eventually stepped out again, this time carrying Olivia's documents. He stopped beside her window without handing them back. Step out of the vehicle. Olivia looked at him with quiet surprise. May I ask why, officer? I'm giving lawful instructions. She unfastened her seat belt without protest. Certainly. After stepping onto the shoulder, Olivia stood exactly where Walker directed, maintaining a respectful distance with both hands visible. She noticed another patrol vehicle driving past without stopping. The second officer glanced toward the scene before continuing his route, apparently seeing nothing unusual. Walker circled slowly around Olivia's vehicle, occasionally pausing to inspect areas already visible from the roadside. His movement suggested he was searching for something that would justify extending the encounter. Yet nothing appeared. The vehicle remained exactly what it had seemed from the beginning, properly registered, legally parked, and entirely unremarkable. Still, Officer Walker was not ready to end the stop. Instead, he asked one more question that had nothing to do with traffic enforcement, and from that moment forward, the encounter ceased to resemble the routine stop it had begun as. Officer Ethan Walker folded his arms as though he had finally reached the question he truly wanted to ask. The rain had eased into a light mist, but the flashing patrol lights continued casting blue reflections across the roadside. Olivia Brooks remained standing beside her vehicle exactly where she had been instructed, her posture relaxed, her expression unchanged. Walker looked directly at her. Who are you meeting this morning? Olivia answered calmly. I'm not meeting anyone. Then why are you dressed for court? She glanced briefly at her navy suit before returning her attention to the officer. Because I had professional appointments scheduled. Walker tilted his head slightly. What kind of appointments? Personal business, officer. The response was polite, but it clearly disappointed him. You're avoiding my questions. I'm answering the questions that relate to the traffic stop. For a brief moment, the silence between them felt heavier than the rain. Walker looked toward the vehicle. Again before walking slowly around it a second time. He inspected the rear license plate, glanced through the back windows, then returned to the driver's side. Nothing appeared suspicious. Nothing suggested criminal activity. Yet he continued searching for a reason to justify the growing length of the encounter. He finally stopped beside Olivia once more. Do you mind if I search the vehicle? Olivia answered immediately, her tone never changing. Officer, I do not consent to a search. Walker studied her face. You sound like you've said that before. Olivia offered a faint, courteous smile. I simply understand my rights. Something about that answer visibly irritated him. Instead of returning her documents and concluding the stop, he looked toward the highway, then back at Olivia. People who have nothing to hide usually cooperate. Olivia did not react. I have cooperated from the moment you activated your emergency lights. I pulled over safely, provided my documents, stepped out when instructed, and answered every question related to the stop. Walker's jaw tightened. I'm the one asking the questions here. Yes, officer. Again, there was no argument. No raised voice. No hostility. Her composure left him with nothing to respond to except more questions. Several additional minutes passed. Vehicles continued moving steadily along the roadway while Olivia remained standing in the drizzle. Her clothing was beginning to collect small droplets of rain, yet she never complained. Walker checked his watch before finally speaking into his shoulder radio. His transmission was brief and difficult to hear over the passing traffic, but no additional units responded. Whatever answer he had hoped to receive apparently never came. He walked back toward Olivia carrying her license and registration once again but still made no effort to return them. Instead, he reached into his citation book. The sound of paper separating echoed softly beneath the steady rhythm of rain. Olivia watched without interruption as he began writing. She understood that the encounter had moved beyond ordinary traffic enforcement. It had become something else entirely. She simply did not yet know how far Officer Walker intended to take it. When he finally tore the completed citation from the pad, he looked at her with quiet certainty, believing the matter was now entirely under his control. Neither of them realized that every word, every delay, and every decision had already been preserved by the very camera attached to his own uniform. By the time the hearing resumed, the rain outside had stopped, but the atmosphere inside courtroom 3 remained heavy with expectation. Judge Rebecca Holloway reviewed the file once more while the clerk organized the exhibits that had been submitted before the proceeding began. To everyone watching from the gallery, the case appeared remarkably straightforward. A veteran police officer claimed he had conducted a lawful traffic stop. A citizen insisted she had been treated unfairly. Without additional evidence, many quietly assumed the officer's version would prevail. Officer Ethan Walker stood with quiet confidence, his citation book and incident report neatly arranged before him. Years in uniform had taught him how to testify with certainty. His report described an uncooperative driver who allegedly refused to answer reasonable questions, delayed the investigation, and displayed suspicious behavior throughout the encounter. On paper, the language sounded professional. Detached. Convincing. Judge Holloway looked toward him. Officer Walker, you may summarize the events that led to the citation. Walker stepped forward. Your Honor, I initiated a lawful traffic stop after observing a moving violation. During the encounter, the driver became evasive when asked routine questions. Based on her behavior, I believed additional investigation was appropriate before concluding the stop. The judge listened carefully while taking several notes. Nothing in his testimony appeared openly aggressive. Every sentence sounded measured. Every explanation seemed reasonable when viewed without context. When he finished, Judge Holloway turned toward Olivia Brooks. Ms. Brooks, you may respond. Olivia rose calmly from her seat. She adjusted the sleeve of her blazer before speaking in a steady voice. Your Honor, I complied with every lawful instruction given to me. I provided my documents immediately, exited my vehicle when instructed, and remained respectful throughout the encounter. Walker folded his arms but remained silent. Olivia continued. The duration of the stop extended far beyond what was necessary for the alleged traffic violation. I was repeatedly questioned about matters unrelated to the purpose of the stop, despite fully cooperating from the beginning. Judge Holloway glanced briefly at the incident report again. Officer Walker states your answers raised additional concerns. Olivia nodded politely. Respectfully, Your Honor, answering only the questions related to a traffic stop should never be interpreted as suspicious. The courtroom became unusually quiet. Several spectators exchanged thoughtful looks, but no one spoke. The judge rested her pen against the file. Do you have any witnesses present today? Olivia hesitated for only a moment before answering. Not at this time, Your Honor. Walker allowed himself the faintest smile. Without corroboration, he believed the written report carried greater weight than her recollection of the encounter. Judge Holloway closed one section of the file. Very well. Unless additional evidence is presented, the court will proceed based upon the testimony and documents currently before it. Olivia gently placed one hand on the leather portfolio resting beside her chair. Your Honor, I respectfully ask the court to review the complete dashboard and body camera recordings before reaching any findings. The request lingered in the silence. Judge Holloway looked toward the clerk, then back toward the officer. Before she could respond, the courtroom doors opened quietly behind the gallery, and an unexpected visitor stepped inside without drawing immediate attention to himself. The quiet sound of the courtroom door closing drew only a few casual glances from those seated near the back. Most remained focused on the exchange unfolding before the bench. Judge Rebecca Holloway lowered her reading glasses and looked toward the clerk. Has the court received the digital recordings requested by Ms. Brooks? The clerk checked the case file before answering. Not yet, Your Honor. The request was submitted this morning, but the files have not been entered into evidence. Judge Holloway nodded thoughtfully. Very well. Officer Ethan Walker stood with renewed confidence. Without the recordings, he believed his written report would remain the strongest account of the encounter. He folded his hands calmly before him, waiting for the hearing to move toward its conclusion. Olivia Brooks remained seated without displaying the slightest sign of concern. Her composure puzzled several spectators. Most people facing an unfavorable hearing would appear anxious. She simply waited, as though she understood that timing mattered as much as truth itself. Judge Holloway looked toward her once again. Ms. Brooks, unless additional admissible evidence is available today, the court must rely upon the testimony already presented. Olivia stood slowly. I understand, Your Honor. She paused briefly before continuing. May I have one moment before the court proceeds? Go ahead. Olivia turned toward the rear of the courtroom. Her eyes settled on the man who had quietly entered only moments earlier and now stood respectfully beside the gallery doors. He wore a dark business suit rather than a police uniform, yet his posture reflected decades of command. Silver hair framed a calm, disciplined face, and a leather credential case rested discreetly beneath one arm. Without raising her voice, Olivia spoke only 6 words. Daniel, thank you for coming. Several heads turned simultaneously. The man offered a small nod before walking toward the front of the courtroom with measured steps. The bailiff instinctively straightened as recognition crossed his face. 2 uniformed deputies exchanged surprised glances. Even Officer Walker frowned slightly, trying to determine why the unfamiliar man suddenly commanded such quiet respect. Judge Holloway observed the unusual reaction spreading across the room. Sir, would you please identify yourself for the record? The man stopped beside Olivia. His voice remained calm and professional. Daniel Brooks, Your Honor. He opened the credential case and presented his official identification to the bailiff, who immediately carried it to the bench. Judge Holloway examined the credentials for only a second before looking back up, her expression subtly changing. The room grew completely silent. Officer Walker's confidence faded almost imperceptibly as he watched the judge return the identification. Daniel Brooks spoke without emotion. Your Honor, I am the chief of police for this department. A ripple of astonishment swept through the courtroom. Walker's eyes shifted immediately toward Olivia. She never looked at him. Judge Holloway remained composed, though her tone became noticeably more deliberate. "Chief Brooks, are you appearing today in your official capacity?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "No, Your Honor. I am here first as the husband of Ms. Olivia Brooks." The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument spoken that morning. Yet before anyone could process the revelation, the chief added one final sentence that changed the direction of the hearing entirely. "And I respectfully request that this court review every second of the body camera and dashboard recordings before reaching any decision." The room seemed to grow smaller after Chief Daniel Brooks spoke. No one raised a voice. No one moved. Yet the balance of the hearing shifted in a single quiet moment. Judge Rebecca Holloway looked from the police chief to Olivia Brooks, then toward Officer Ethan Walker, whose confidence had begun to fade beneath the unexpected revelation. The judge rested both hands on the bench. "Chief Brooks," she said evenly, "are you asking this court to intervene on behalf of your wife?" Daniel Brooks answered without hesitation. "No, Your Honor." His voice remained measured, carrying the calm authority of someone who understood both leadership and restraint. "I am asking the court to do exactly what every citizen deserves, review the complete evidence before reaching any conclusion." The simplicity of the request echoed across the silent courtroom. Daniel continued, "If Officer Walker acted appropriately, the recordings will confirm it. If he did not, the recordings deserve the same opportunity to speak." Judge Holloway nodded slowly. There was no argument with that reasoning. She turned toward the clerk. "Has the department preserved the body camera and dashboard recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor," the clerk replied. "They were delivered electronically shortly before the hearing resumed." Walker's shoulders stiffened. Until that moment, he had assumed the hearing would rest primarily on testimony and his written report. Now the encounter itself was about to become the primary witness. Judge Holloway looked toward the courtroom technician. "Please prepare the recordings for playback." The technician nodded and began connecting the digital evidence to the courtroom display. A large monitor positioned beside the witness stand illuminated with the department's evidence management system. Every movement inside the courtroom slowed. Attorneys closed their notebooks. Spectators leaned forward. Even the deputies stationed near the doors fixed their attention on the screen. Daniel Brooks quietly stepped away from Olivia and took a seat in the gallery instead of remaining beside her. His decision did not go unnoticed. He had not come to influence the proceeding. He had come to ensure the process remained faithful to the truth. Olivia watched him for only a moment before returning her attention to the bench. She understood exactly why he had done it. Leadership demanded distance when personal relationships risked creating the appearance of favoritism. Judge Holloway observed the gesture with quiet appreciation. "For the record," she said, "the court notes that Chief Brooks has requested no special consideration beyond review of the available evidence." Daniel inclined his head respectfully. "That is correct, Your Honor." Officer Walker remained standing at counsel's table. He kept his expression controlled, but the certainty that had characterized his testimony earlier had begun to disappear. Written reports depended upon memory. Cameras depended only upon time. The courtroom technician finally looked toward the bench. "Your Honor, the recordings are ready." Judge Holloway gave a single nod. "Very well." She looked across the courtroom before speaking one final instruction. "The court will now suspend further testimony until the recordings have been reviewed in their entirety." The monitor brightened. A timestamp appeared in the upper corner of the screen. Blue emergency lights flashed against rain-covered pavement as the first seconds of the traffic stop came into view. For the first time that morning, every person inside the courtroom would witness exactly the same events, exactly as they happened, without assumptions, without opinions, and without anyone deciding in advance what the truth should be. The first images appeared without sound. Blue emergency lights reflected across rain-soaked pavement as the dashboard camera captured Olivia Brooks signaling, slowing safely, and pulling onto the shoulder exactly as every driver was taught to do. Judge Rebecca Holloway watched the screen without interruption. The courtroom remained completely silent except for the faint hum of the projector. "Turn on the audio," the judge instructed. The technician complied. Officer Ethan Walker's voice immediately filled the room. Calm at first. Professional. Olivia's greeting followed only seconds later. "Good morning, officer." Everyone heard it clearly. Polite. Respectful. Walker's response never came. Instead, the recording showed him studying the interior of the vehicle before requesting her license, registration, and insurance. Olivia calmly explained every movement before reaching toward the center console. "I'm reaching for my registration now." "Go ahead," Walker answered. She handed over each document without hesitation. Judge Holloway lowered her pen. That portion alone contradicted the written report's suggestion that Olivia had been reluctant to cooperate. The recording continued. Several minutes passed while Walker remained inside his patrol vehicle. The dashboard clock displayed the passing time with quiet precision. When he returned, the questions began. "Where are you coming from? Where are you going? What kind of work do you do?" The courtroom listened as Olivia answered each inquiry calmly, never raising her voice, never refusing to respond. Then another exchange appeared. "Do you mind if I search the vehicle?" Walker asked. Olivia answered exactly as she had testified. "Officer, I do not consent to a search." There was no hostility in her voice. No disrespect. Only a lawful refusal. Moments later came the sentence that caused several people in the gallery to shift uncomfortably. Walker replied, "People who have nothing to hide usually cooperate." Olivia remained composed. "I have cooperated from the beginning." Judge Holloway looked briefly toward Officer Walker before returning her attention to the monitor. The recording continued uninterrupted. Minute after minute passed. The body camera timestamp matched the dashboard footage perfectly. Olivia stood patiently beside the road in the rain while Walker walked repeated circles around her vehicle without identifying any traffic-related concern beyond the original stop. There was no evidence of threatening behavior. No attempt to flee. No interference with the investigation. Finally, Walker began writing the citation. The body camera captured him returning to Olivia while still holding her documents. The reason for the prolonged detention never appeared. Neither recording supported the claim that additional investigation had become necessary because of her conduct. When the final frame faded to black, the courtroom remained silent. No one hurried to speak. The evidence required no explanation. Judge Holloway slowly closed Officer Walker's written report and placed it beside the monitor rather than in front of her. She folded her hands before looking directly at the officer. "Officer Walker," she said quietly, "your testimony stated that Ms. Brooks became evasive and uncooperative during the stop." She paused for only a moment. "Having now reviewed the recordings, this court has observed something very different." Walker opened his mouth as though searching for an explanation, but before he could answer, Chief Daniel Brooks remained seated in the gallery, saying nothing at all. He did not need to. The evidence had already begun speaking more clearly than anyone else in the courtroom ever could. Judge Rebecca Holloway allowed the silence to linger for several seconds before speaking again. In that courtroom, no one seemed eager to interrupt what the evidence had already made unmistakably clear. She closed Officer Ethan Walker's incident report, folded her hands, and looked directly at him. "Officer Walker," she said calmly, "the written report submitted to this court materially differs from the recordings we have just reviewed." Walker swallowed before answering. "Your Honor, I acted based on my observations at the time." "Your observations," the judge replied, "are expected to be supported by objective facts. The recordings demonstrate that Ms. Brooks complied with your instructions, answered your questions respectfully, and never displayed the evasive conduct described in your report." Walker lowered his eyes. For the first time since the hearing had begun, he appeared uncertain of what to say next. Judge Holloway turned toward Olivia Brooks. Ms. Brooks, this court appreciates the professionalism you displayed throughout the encounter. Olivia answered with the same quiet dignity she had shown from the beginning. Thank you, Your Honor. My hope has never been to embarrass anyone. I simply wanted the facts to be seen. Those words settled over the courtroom with unexpected weight. They carried no triumph. No bitterness. Only honesty. Judge Holloway then looked toward Daniel Brooks, who remained seated among the spectators rather than beside his wife. Chief Brooks, would you like to address the court? Daniel stood slowly. Only briefly, Your Honor. He adjusted his jacket before speaking. Today, I am proud of my wife, not because she is my wife, but because she trusted the process even when the process appeared to be failing her. As Chief of Police, I owe the same duty to every citizen in this community. A badge is not a shield against accountability. It is a promise to accept it. Several deputies standing near the courtroom doors straightened almost instinctively. Judge Holloway nodded. Well said. She returned her attention to Officer Walker. This court dismisses the citation issued to Ms. Brooks. Furthermore, based upon the inconsistencies between your testimony and the recorded evidence, I am referring this matter to the department's Internal Affairs Division for formal review. Walker closed his eyes briefly before offering a quiet response. Yes, Your Honor. There was no argument left to make. The evidence had spoken with greater precision than memory ever could. As the hearing concluded, spectators slowly began leaving the courtroom. Some glanced toward Olivia with quiet admiration. Others looked toward Chief Brooks, recognizing that he had never once attempted to use his position to influence the outcome. Instead, he had insisted that the truth be allowed to stand on its own. Olivia gathered her portfolio and met Daniel near the courtroom doors. He smiled gently. You handled yourself exactly the way I knew you would. She returned the smile. I believed the truth would eventually catch up. Together they walked into the afternoon sunlight that had finally broken through the clouds. Behind them, the courthouse doors closed, but the lesson remained. Power may command attention for a moment, yet integrity earns respect for a lifetime. And on that day, everyone inside courtroom 3 discovered that justice is strongest not when it protects authority, but when it demands that authority answer to the truth.